These are some of the scenes emerging from Iran. Protests in some of Iran's biggest markets, and this is going to come back. Because by the time you see this video, the world might be fundamentally different in a meaningful way, because there are serious protests in Iran and they're getting worse. And the Trump administration has warned Iran that if it gets brutal with protesters, there's going to be problems, and this is going to come back too. Iran's official president right now is Masoud Pezeshkian, and he's governing at a time where there is an economic crisis emerging in Iran. Inflation is as high as 3,000%. Meaning that if you had $1,000 saved, that would now be worth in spending power about $32. But the real power behind everything in Iran is Ayatollah Khamenei. He holds dominion over the three branches of government, commands the armed forces, basically leads the economy, and no high-level decision in Iran is done outside of his purview. And in recent months, Iran's oil wealth has been drained. There's been sanctions, and they've had to stop subsidizing imports. This was in early December, which means that merchants are facing super high import prices, meaning that they have to pass those prices on to regular people. And the merchants are the first ones that led the protest. And this happens during an important backdrop where after the Trump administration successfully bombed the nuclear site this summer, people are wondering if the Iranian regime really does hold control. And an important and very interesting part of this story is the Grand Bazaar in Tehran. It's ostensibly a marketplace, but it is actually a lot more. It's kind of a political center. And so when the bazaar, basically the merchants, break with the Islamic Republic, it's important. And the reason that the merchants are out is that they're facing this inflation, and they're hearing from the supreme leader that he wants to pay to rebuild the missile arsenal. So people are taking to the streets and they're saying they want the mullahs gone. The mullahs are basically this like cleric / political class. It's kind of like a senator if they were like ordained by the supreme leader, and they basically manage things. And honestly, a lot of this has to do with what the Trump administration has been doing in the Middle East, both militarily and economically. It's super interesting because you might remember that about a year ago, the Assad regime, those were the people who were in charge of Syria, and man, Bashar al-Assad was not a good guy, collapsed. And if you look at it on a map, Iran is right here, Syria is right here. So Iran was basically using Syria to get at this area. And they were funding Hezbollah, which is basically a terrorist group that Iran funds in Syria. So when Syria collapses, basically Iran doesn't have this staging point and it's got to defend itself. And after the collapse of Syria, publicly the supreme leader was saying mean things about America, but then reaching out through back channels to try to get a deal so that he could stay in power. And historically, whenever Iran faces protests, it has a certain way of dealing with things. This is from 2020, but then just a couple years later, more protests, more force. So now Trump is saying, hey, if you mess with your protesters, we're going to intervene. And this is interesting because we definitely have the capability to do it. As recent as August, we had a lot of military assets in the North Arabian Sea. And the supreme leader, who's really old, is also sheltering in a bunker. What Trump's doing here is invoking the responsibility to protect. And this is a UN concept, which basically says officially that if you do this to your protesters, you're now the bad guy. But while militarily and economically Iran is alone, that's not what's happening in the rest of the Gulf nations, all in the Middle East. They're going all out for America and for Trump. You might remember that Trump took a big trip to the Middle East last year in May. And they rolled out the red carpet for him. One of the most striking images to me was when the women did this hair ceremony called Khaliji. And it's basically a show of happiness and typically reserved for people inside the culture. They really rolled out the red carpet for Donald Trump, including the United Arab Emirates lighting up the world's tallest tower with an American flag. Behind the scenes, there's a new group of investors and movers and shakers, basically, that are putting together a Middle East that is peaceful and prosperous, led by people like Jared Kushner and one of America's most famous investors, Ray Dalio. And this is not going to work. So as Iran's supreme leader fades into the shadows, what would you like to see in the Middle East? Do you care?